Oh, look, good afternoon. You're very, very patient. Thank you in this final session. It's been an intense day. I do have several hats. I'm an academic at the University of South Australia. I am, oddly, still a DJ after 21 years. People do seem to throw money at me to pay strange records. But the reason I'm really here to talk to you today is two things. One is through my role as a community advocate for the Adelaide West End Association, and the second as my lifelong profession as an interior designer. So what I'm going to talk very much about, I've been an interior designer since 1984, so that's longer than I've been a DJ. And it's about the role of business in cities. I'm notoriously dyslexic with these things, so if anything catches on fire, you've been given adequate instructions how to get out of the building, so let's move forward. All right, let's just look at Lee Street for a second. The Adelaide West End Association is a community group, and Lee Street is one of the jewels in the West End precinct. These people aren't photoshopped on Lee Street. They are genuinely there, and they are genuinely there en masse. The reasons these people are here en masse is to do with an annual event that we have hosted for the last 2 years and will host again this year, which is the West End Christmas Market. And this demonstrates actually what businesses bring to city. This is a trader-generated event. It's kindly sponsored by council, and this year sponsored through DIPT as well. But it's actually the traders who themselves have decided that they actually want to have an event that actually celebrates this part of the city. And every year we host a market that enables designers and makers who practice in the West End to be able to actually sell their wares and goods in a high quality arts market that actually celebrates a different view on business in the West End. What we associate West End with is usually show the slide of the vomit at this particular point in time. Because I'm sensitive, some people don't like pictures of vomit. I take a lot of pictures of vomit. That's what we associate the West End. The problem to do with the late night economy in the West End. The reality of the West End is we actually have a thriving business culture in that part of the city. It's often quite invisible. So this thing about uncovering business activity and the role of business in the community is what I want to talk about today. Now, there's two streets. Rundle Street East, Hindley Street. Hindley Street's a street that we typically associate with the West End. Hindley Street, just to remind you, is longer, just slightly I believe, than Rundle Street and Rundle Mall combined. It is a much more complex and difficult beast. But what makes East End vibrant, lest we can, whilst I still can't say that word, and what makes Hindley Street appear quite dead relates to the business use of those spaces, to do with the uses of the street. And it demonstrates very clearly that if you have, as Josh said before, Josh alluded before about the importance of actually having shops on streets and having open out shop fronts and engaging shop fronts on streets. If you walk down Hindley Street, it is not like that. The business that stands out on Hindley Street is McDonald's. Because it stands out as being clear. You can see into it, it's open. People are in there. And the East End is a street that's full of shop fronts. So the way that we perceive Rundle Street East is actually based on its shop fronts and the vitality of its business community, and the West End to do with the strange schizophrenic nature between the daytime economies and the nighttime economies. We might have a plethora of daytime economies concentrated in one space that are open during the day but not open at night, and then we have nighttime economies which is open during the night and not during the day. And it's that problem and the physical ramifications of that problem that actually defines the quality of Hindley Street. It's one of the reasons it kind of holds it back. Anyway, this is the Adelaide West End Association. We changed our identity some years ago. We used to be all about cinema and theatre and entertainment and all of that sort of stuff, but we made a deliberate decision about 3 years ago to actually shift ourselves away from this idea of being an entertainment precinct to an idea of being actually a genuinely diverse community. Hence, West End, we, and our tagline is "We are the West End." So that's the first thing we did to change the perception of our precinct through changing our identity. The importance of a precinct group in the city is that it enables businesses to think beyond their front door and actually be able to team together with the strength in numbers to be able to work as effective advocates for their communities. The day-to-day nature of running small business in particular is you don't have an awful lot of time to be able to devote to the bigger issues, and your concerns aren't actually often about the bigger issues, they're just about making enough money to pay the rent and see yourself operating in a sustainable future. But by participating together as a community body, like the Adelaide West End Association, we can bring a collective voice about the broad views of our community to government and council to be able to affect change. And we like to see ourselves as empowered agents for change. I think in the West End, the West End will change. I can only talk about the West End because that's really all I know about. This unprecedented levels of public money and private money being expended around our perimeter. But we want that change to happen. We want to have a thriving business community in the West End. We want to be able to sell things and show things and have spaces where people can enjoy themselves. But what we don't want to go through is a process of total gentrification. We also want to go through a process that leads the West End, maintains its character, that is quite raffish, is a little bit grotty around the edges, but it's not a dangerous place to be. So we work both in terms of acting as empowered agents for change, but also work in terms of keeping what works. What makes us very different from other sort of advocacy groups, let's just say single business entity advocacy groups, someone like the AHA or somebody like that, is that we're not really powered by one particular interest. We're not there to just keep the status quo as it is and to keep the models kind of moving in that particular way. The good thing about the West End Association is we represent a really broad church of businesses in our precinct, and we've managed quite successfully, I think, to be able to find a way of kind of reconciling some of the contested areas. Not totally. I will say that the Adelaide West End Association is in fact the only incorporated body that speaks on behalf of the West End. There is another one you sometimes hear about, but that's really just one person. Yeah, you know what I mean. But I like my house, I'm not going to say his name. Where we're going at the moment, and this is a really important issue, we believe very firmly that the West End Association is a representative for business and community in our precinct, and we are also about community. We're also education institutions and arts institutions also sit in our organisations. So we really want to move from this state of dependence to a state of actual autonomy. We're going through a process at the moment of actually asking our community, what does the community actually want from its precinct? What do you want? What sort of West End do you want? We're actually surveying currently over 1,000 businesses in our precinct, and we are walking actually into people's shops and offices and everything in the precinct and actually handing them a piece of paper and asking them what they want. Once we know what people want, we may actually form ourselves into a different sort of organisation that's funded through a different model. So we're one of the precincts you may have read about in the media that's actually looking to attract a separate commercial rate to our precinct, money derived from our community to fund our community. So this would make us a very different sort of organisation, and the challenge of that is quite significant in terms of the way that we move forward into the future. And this is kind of a process, the way that we're approaching this is a demonstration of how co-creation models can start to operate. So we're moving from a state of, as an organisation, saying, can we please be funded by grant, to a state where we can actually fund ourselves out of ourselves. And it's about the top, so bottom up meeting the top down. So the initiatives that we can actually start to talk, will come out of this business needs survey, we can find ways ourselves as a community to be able to fund those initiatives. And that makes us a very different sort of beast from just another sort of community advocate group. We'll actually be far better resourced. But it does come with significant challenges, and the challenge is really to do with who's responsible for what is probably the biggest one. Because the first thing when we start to talk about things like a separate rate is don't we already pay the rates? Doesn't council already provide all that stuff? Well, the reality is that any government can only provide so much. We heard an earlier speaker talking about the effects of an ageing population, meaning in fact the authorities may not necessarily be able to provide the sort of infrastructure that we have enjoyed to date. This is one strategy that we can take, and through models such as business improvement districts, which some of you may be aware of, there's over 200 of these things in the world, we may be able to find a way that we can actually be more self-sustaining to do with our future, and even start to provide community infrastructure. So that's the West End Association. That's one of the things that the business brings to the table. But you know, the other thing that businesses bring to cities are their premises. This is, I'm going to show you some really nice contemporary South Australian interior design and architectural work. This is Oxygen's office. Who's been to Oxygen's office? It's nice. It's one of the nicest workplaces you'd ever meet. And business premises in city streets are the things that make city streets. Josh before talked about bringing business to the city as being important because you bring active street frontages to the city. This is so important, particularly to our precinct. If you walk down Hindley Street any day during the week, close down nightclubs. got to say, closed down Arts SA as well. It's no better than the nightclubs. You can't see in there, you've got no idea what's going on in that place, and you've got no idea what's going on in the dead nightclub. The importance of the relationship to interior space to the street is key to cities. I'm an interior designer. I'm deeply prejudiced about my profession. I will ask, how many interior designers are sitting in this room? One. How many architects are sitting in this room? More than one. But you know, our profession is notorious for actually not engaging in city issues. We are so contained within ourselves, it's somewhat embarrassing. Yet, when I think of a city street and I think of that difference between Rundle Street and Hindley Street, what I'm perceiving when I'm walking down Rundle Street is interior space, threshold, footpath, road, footpath, threshold, interior space. The street, for me as an interior designer, works between the back of one premise to the back of the other premise. And that's how we perceive the street. It is not about the shop front, it is not about the building, it is about that lived experience of cities, which is about using the interiors of buildings. So business can club together and can have an influence on the future of cities, but business in itself, by the way that it operates and through design, can influence the way that you feel about it. The achingly beautiful thing, I show my students who make these beautiful things, just do it like this. I don't care, just do it like this every time you deal with the street. The way that oxygen actually occupies the street here is so generous, so transparent and so beautiful. There's a couple of key things that we've heard today. Those of us who went on the tour, we went through the black door, we started to talk here about stories about how workplaces are starting to kind of devolve into a more domestic model. There's been a lot of writing about activity-based work planning since the mid-90s. I kind of like this one, and it's contentious. I kind of like the idea of the leaky office. So this is an interior space that leaks out into the city. This is in the mid-50s. This is how we used to see the leading edge of office design in the mid-50s. The Bureau Landschaft, these enormous deep buildings, they're incredible things, mostly in the Netherlands and in Germany. But that's kind of how, that was the beginning of open plan work. The idea behind this sort of work is about being present. It's predicated by Taylorism and ideas around early 20th century manufacturing. But the idea behind the contemporary workplace, take my own workplace, half of the business of our workplace happens in Fat Coffee on Hindley Street. That's where it happens. If you go to council, you have a meeting at the coffee shop across the road. It happens all the time. So the idea of an office being a contained interior is no longer relevant. Work now happens in a way that's completely devolved around the city, sometimes in even quiet spaces. So that's kind of an interesting thing, the relationship between cities and interior spaces, as interiors are no longer hermetically sealed, and we shouldn't think of them that way. This is the inside of Oxygen's office, and it's just so lovely. We'll set that orange chair. This idea of convivial spaces and convivial cities is, I think, the two are completely linked. That when business thinks about a space that makes their employees happy, the way it relates to the street, and you engage an interior designer to do the work, well, in this instance, the authorship of this is so grey, it's not funny, but everyone's had a go at this interior, and it's an amazing example of the relationship between maker and architect and designer and craftsman and artist. It's extraordinary. Nevertheless, the idea here is about a convivial space that's driven by interior design, but by the design of the interior space, and how a community can start to be together in a workplace that makes them actually really happy. This points to me that interior designers actually are really big experts as placemakers. We have an expertise. It says here on my tag actually that I am an expert. I would question that. I would say to you that I'm a dabbler. I am a steward though. I'm not sure about a publisher. But you know, this is Brian Jennison's work. He's an emerging interior designer who will be a serious person to know in a few years' time. I reckon he already is. One of the things interior designers, through their relationship with business, bring to cities is I think that distinguishes our practice is an intimate understanding about how people operate and how they work, what makes them happy, what makes them comfortable. And that's really what I would suggest that interior designers need to bring to cities. I would encourage all of my colleagues in my profession to become far more active through their relationship with business to actually share the discussion, because it's really important. In my work as an educator, and this I'm going to close on this particular note, I use history as a way of thinking about the future of cities a lot. I use history as a way of thinking about the West End in particular. These are Boer War soldiers. They're off to fight the war. Where are they marching down? Tell me, what street are they marching down? Hindley Street. Okay, would we march our war veterans? Would we march an Anzac Day parade? Would we bring the King or the Queen or the President on a parade up the middle of Hindley Street now? Forget it. Like, that street doesn't exist. It's disgusting. Someone should just blow it up. That's some of the prevailing rhetoric. Yet at some point in time, we had enough civic pride in this part of the street to actually, think this is a good enough place to bring our most important people in society, these guys. So that's shocking, and I use this slide all the time because it just puts into stark contrast how we think about Hindley Street today. I get my students, interior design students, to uncover the hidden stories of our precinct as a way of them reflecting about what needs to happen next, for them actually operating as placemakers on Hindley Street. And this is what they do. This is the work of Sia Roussos, and it's this is the old IMFC building. IFMC building. It's Peregrine Corporation have it now. It's the one that looks really good, painted silver and burgundy on the corner of Hindley and King William Street. And in this instance, which is actually kind of an interesting segue from the previous speaker, Sia is looking at actually how you might sort of strip that interior back and start to create quiet and reflective spaces that are actually right in the middle of the city. This is about interior designers working in commercial space, about interior designers operating as placemakers, through considering very carefully the relationship of interior space to threshold to the footpath. Sometimes I feel we're invisible in this discussion, and I would encourage all of my profession to be far more active and engaging in dealing with the city. That's really all I had to say to you today. My pet things. I didn't talk about music once, which is unfortunate, because not enough time. But my passion is always driven by design, and my passion is driven by a love for the precinct, which is my everyday honour to represent. If you ever want a tour of Hindley Street and the funny things you don't know about,